I thought, this is it. I'm gonna lose my job and then I'm gonna be in a pickle. Redundancy started happening. So I got in one morning, I just felt like there was a weird vibe in the air. Hey everyone, I know a lot of you know me most for doing kind of fashion videos and bags and stuff like that, but these videos are my true passion, and I've got some points that I want to go through for those of you who are employed but maybe you're worried about redundancy. I'm also going to cover those of you who are employed and you don't like your job and you're thinking, am I taking a risk right now moving jobs in the middle of a pandemic? I'm going to cover those of you who are unemployed and you're struggling with interviews, those of you who are unemployed and you work in, say, hospitality, and your job's been affected, and with lockdowns your job's kind of like up and down, you know, one minute you might have a job, the next minute you don't. This video, in amongst the kind of tips and advice, is going to be a story time. The advice I'm going to give you is based on a really tough point that I went through in my life. One of many tough points that we've all been through, but this one was really tough. When the last recession hit, so there was a recession that I think kicked off in 2007 or something. I was new to the job market. I got my first proper job, and then there was news about this recession happening. And I was terrified because all I knew about recessions from my family, from my parents, were that they are difficult. You might look at me and think, yeah, you can afford the bags. I can now, God willing. Fortunes can change. You know, I do not forget. I've been poor and I will go back to it again because I've been there, I've done it, and I will climb out of it. I'm not scared of it, basically. But growing up, you know, our whole family would have to kind of get together, and honestly it would be, you know, have you got any spare fish fingers that we can have for tonight, because we've got no. It was tough. Okay, so when this recession hit, I was scared, and rightly so. The way I see it, that recession, I think, affected a different group of people to this recession now. This recession now, I feel, primarily has impacted people that might work in hospitality, in the sort of theatre, the arts, whereas the recession that happened back then, I feel probably globally affected everyone. And what happened was, so I got my first job and I was scared. Not just because of what I'd known before, but I was scared because I thought, last in, first out, frankly. I thought, this is it. I'm gonna lose my job and then I'm gonna be in a pickle. Redundancy started happening. So I got in one morning and I just felt like there was a weird vibe in the air. Sort of one of stress, but not of my work colleagues. Sort of, I can't put my finger on it. You know how you can just sense or whatever. So anyway, we're like doing our work, and one by one we get called to there's like a boardroom, and some of my colleagues were going in and then coming out and being really upset, and it was redundancies, and no one had been told. It was just, you got called in and you either had your job or you didn't. And I thought, this is it. I'm you know, I'm screwed. Don't forget, at the time as well, I had major debt from university. I mean, massive debt. And if I'd stopped paying that, you know, all of my credit cards and stuff, I'd have been in so much trouble. So I could not lose this job. I got called to the meeting room and I kept my job. They were like, we're going to keep you, you work really well, but you're going to have to take a 30% pay cut. Everyone that's staying has got to take that because we can't afford to pay you all the full amount. Now, that in itself was also really scary because at the same time, the recession was really kicking in. With David and I, because of redundancies, I was the only person working at the time. So I was not only having to like pay for stuff, but I was having to cover over all of the interest on the credit cards, and the interest went up because of like the recession and stuff. I had a friend who got kicked out of her flat because she couldn't keep up the repayments, and the council helped her and they put her in a council accommodation. I had another friend who'd been made redundant. She had to move back home with her family. It wasn't just something that affected me, it affected everyone that I knew. So anyway, it was difficult because those of us that were left had to do the work of everyone that had been made redundant. So it meant longer hours on less pay, but it was kind of like, well, which leg do you want to be stabbed in? You can either lose your job entirely, or you can work serious overtime, but you're taking home 30% less than what you know what I mean? It was kind of like quite difficult. What I've always done in every place that I've worked in, and this is one thing that I would recommend to any of you watching, if you're nervous about redundancy and you just want to kind of, it's not going to work in every time, but I think it does help. In every place I've worked, I've always liked to have regular monthly meetings with my line manager. And I do it because I really like the critique, and I like to know, can I do anything better? That's the primary reason. But I came to thinking after those redundancies, I thought, you know, that could have also been a reason why my job was saved. I think to have been made redundant when I was very much in touch with what can I do anything better, versus other people that wouldn't have done that, probably it would have looked a bit weird on my manager, because then it's like, well, if you're going to make that person redundant, but they've been checking with you the whole time, am I doing a good enough job? Then it's kind of like, well, why'd you make them redundant? Now, this is another thing that I did, and this I have to tell you about. Let's say you were working somewhere in 2019, all was good, you were going to go for a pay rise, you were going to go for a promotion, and then this happened. What happened to me was at one place that I worked, we had our reviews. Now, I've always told you, one thing that I've always done with reviews, and I highly recommend it, is just get, you know, have like a Word document on your computer or have a notepad, and just month by month make note of any good work that you do. You know, if you work on a project and it got delivered ahead of time, or if you work in a restaurant and you built up return customers because of your customer service skills, make note of it, because it's really easy at the end of the year when you have your review, everyone's forgotten all of that stuff that you did, and what you're trying to sell yourself in. You're trying to upsell yourself. Now, moving on to those of you who are employed, you may or you may not like where you work, but you want to move. First thing, you might be worried into thinking, is now the most stupid time to look for a new job? You would be amazed. I thought the same thing back in that last recession. I'll tell you why you'd be amazed. It's not allowed legally, but it does happen. In a recession, a lot of the time as well, a lot of companies use it as an excuse to get rid of people that they wanted to get rid of anyway, for whatever reason. Maybe that person wasn't doing a very good job, maybe they were argumentative, or maybe they clashed with their boss and their boss was like, yeah, they do a good job, but I just don't want to see your face again. It's illegal, but it happens. And it happened massively in that last recession, but I also noticed there was a lot of it that happened at the beginning of COVID, and you know, all the way through COVID, more and more people getting made redundant. And therefore, I always found there's a lot of work around at this time, because companies are doing that. As I say, it's not allowed, but it happens. So don't be scared of looking for a new role. The other benefit to right now, the massive benefit, is that with a lot of meetings being done on Zoom, you are going to be in a much better position to be able to have as many interviews as it takes on Zoom without you having to make up a million excuses about, I've got to go to the dentist, I'm going to the doctor. Like, you know, I always hate that when you work at a job and you keep having to pull out the old dentist gag, and it's like, after a while it's really obvious what's going on. With Zoom, you can do all of your first stage interviews on Zoom, saves you having to leave the office and make some lame excuse. Then if you feel like there's a gel, and if you get called back for second interview, then you can do it face to face. The problem I always found is that you might go for a first interview, they're not interested in you, you're not interested in them, and you've spent half a day out of the office with some excuse made, and for a job that you came to realise when you got there you didn't even want in the first place. So use this to your advantage. Two really good ways of getting work is, the first way, can't speak for other countries, okay, but in the UK there is a website called indeed.co.uk. I would go through that, but also on top of that, if you can make alliances with certain recruiters. So what happened to me was I had two recruiters that it wasn't planned actually. They ended up being the two people that I used whenever I was looking for a new job, and it was only them. And the good thing was they knew me, they knew my background, so it wasn't too difficult to get them to look for a job. And also when you've got that connection, they're not just kind of grabbing your CV off Indeed.com and trying to connect you with a company that you could connect yourself with because they're trying to get that commission. It's kind of more than that. So try and make alliances with recruiters, and the way to do that is get in touch with someone and stay in touch. If you are looking for a job, connect with them on LinkedIn and just contact, like stay in contact on email. Whenever you look for a job in the future, contact them that way. Tweak your CV for every single job interview that you go for. When you get the job spec, if it's something that you like the look of, pick out key terminology in that job spec to do with the tasks that they need you to fulfill, and include some, like pepper through the words on your CV, some of those skills, because then at a glance, to the person who's not going to sit there and read your whole CV, they can just skim read it and be like, yeah, you do all of that stuff that we need. And finally, before I move on to those of you who are unemployed at the moment, if you've got a job interview lined up, always look the person up on LinkedIn and do it so that they, you know how you can have it so that when you look up someone on LinkedIn, it comes up with your actual name and they get a notification to be like, Joe Blogs has looked you up. Do that, because it really shows initiative. The person most likely is going to see that notification. Also have a look through their history. And then what's really good is when you, if it's relevant, to make a bit of small talk in the interview. So to be like, oh, you worked with that place. Oh yeah, I knew someone that worked that way. What it does is it's a soft way of implying, I checked you out on LinkedIn because I know what I'm doing and I'm interested in you and the job, and that's why I want the job. Also, if you do have a face-to-face interview, always take a notepad and pencil or pen, even if you've got no intention of writing anything. I don't know why, just makes you look a bit more prepared. And always have at least one question. You know, at the end of an interview, they're like, have you got any questions? And the truth is, no, I don't. But just have a question. It just shows that you've actually thought through the whole process in that interview. Going back to the point I made earlier as well, keep a list of all the things that you've achieved. And I personally find when I go for a new job, if I can go into the interview with that presentation, it blows them away, because no one does that. And also it takes the anxiety out of the interview, because everyone in that room interviewing you, they're all focused on your presentation and you kind of talking through, oh, on that job this happened, on that job this happened. And I've always found it a pleasant distraction for me and for them. Now a few points to cover for any of you who are looking, maybe you've been made redundant and you're thinking, I don't even like that sector I worked in anyway, I want to move into another sector, but how, because I'm not qualified. Maybe you work in a sector like hospitality that's been hit really badly. First of all, talking about hospitality as an example, I worked in hospitality going all the way back for quite a long time, and one thing that came into my mind when all of this happened is, I think the problem right now with hospitality is every time there's a lockdown, you all lose your jobs, and then every time it opens back up again, you get them back, but no one can live like that. If you want to stay in that line of work, have a look at staying in hospitality, but in a sector that is going to be more stable. So for example, you could work in hospitality in a care home. You could work in hospitality in a hospital. Working somewhere like that, where you're not working at a cafe that's got to close down every time there's a lockdown, you've got more of a consistent, regular job. One of the actual really good things that's come out of lockdown, and I know loads of you have told me, because we've got this time where we're kind of stuck at home, a lot of you have told me that you have done open university courses online where you're retraining to move into a sector that you've always wanted to work in, but because you're caught in the whole 9-to-5 thing, you've never had the time to actually do this, and you used to get home from work and you're tired, etc. Whereas right now, you're working from home, You can actually take your lunch break and sit there and do your work. After work, you're not having to spend hours commuting, so you can jump straight onto your computer and do your course. And then the final point, I have had quite a lot of you also writing to me from the hospitality and retail sector saying, I don't really want to do this anymore. Plus with COVID, it's made it really volatile. One minute I've got work, the next minute I don't. And you have spoken to me about wanting to get into different sectors, specifically sectors that are sort of more office-based. And you've said, well, how am I going to do that? Because I've got no experience working in that sort of area. I bet you do. Here is the thing that I really recommend, and I've had to write all of this down. For any of you watching, please, I hope this helps you, give it a try. You have to get your foot in the door, and you can. Let's say you want to get a job somewhere that's more clerical, is that the word? Look for positions on indeed.co.uk. If you're in the UK, it's a good place. Look for entry-level roles. It could be in administration, it could be in reception, it could be even working like in a call centre type thing, but it moves you away from, let's say, hospitality into a more office-based environment. Once you've got your foot in the door, it is so much easier to start working your way up. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, but I don't have anything to put on a CV, I've always worked in a restaurant, or I've always worked, you know, in some such job. Seriously, you will have stuff to put on your CV, and there's a way of doing it, and it's a way of taking the tasks that you do every day in your job and you take them for granted and you think they're nothing, and they are not. So to give you an example, take aspects that you do and describe them in a CV in business terminology. If you don't have a CV, there are really good templates online, and I would always recommend with a CV to have your name and everything at the top, and then to have just a short paragraph, like a profile of you, before it goes into all of the places that you've worked and stuff. And the reason why I say that is with that profile, most of the time you wouldn't sit there and read a whole CV, but you would skim the profile, and the profile is literally something like working in a fast-paced customer service environment, being trusted to deal with stock takes and the running costs of a company. You can word it that way, and in that profile, when you are applying for a job, that is the place where I pepper most of the keywords to describe the job that I'm going to. I will tailor that profile section very, very slightly to match what it is, the job that I'm going for. For example, if you serve customers, that is customer service. It's not only customer service, but part of your job, even if you're like front of house in a restaurant. I'm focusing on restaurants here, by the way, because for some reason I've had loads of emails from you guys who work in restaurants and cafes recently. If you work front of house, that's a really important job. That job is about how the customer feels the minute they arrive at the establishment. And your job really can decide whether they come back again or not. The level of service that you give will dictate what that person might go and review it as on TripAdvisor. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.